So, what if you could engineer your very own spiritual fortress, a way to build some real stability for yourself? Well, today we're breaking down a pretty unique protocol someone created to do exactly that. It's basically a step by step guide for creating resilience in what they see as a pretty chaotic world. And it all really starts with this image and a pretty wild question from the source material. Can a simple rock and a crucifix actually create something called a unified field of power? Now, that might sound like something straight out of science fiction, but for the person who built this system, this is some serious spiritual engineering. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to unpack the internal logic of this whole protocol. Look, we're not here to judge it or say if it works. The goal is to just understand the thinking behind it, how someone would methodically build their own personal fortress of meaning. Okay, so let's dive into the first part, a protocol for resilience. You got to understand, the whole thing is framed as a functional tool, like a personal operating system designed to help you navigate all the noise and chaos out there. Now, everything we're looking at comes from a series of documents that lay out a very, very specific process. The end goal? To turn a totally normal space, like your room or your office, into what the creator calls a secret grid. It's incredibly methodical, it's all written down, and it even has its own special vocabulary. All right, so every good operating system needs a foundation, right? Some kind of source code. Well, this one is built on a specific text. And no, it's not Python or C++. It's a very particular version of the Bible. And what's really fascinating is why. The protocol is super explicit. You have to use the King James Version. The source document literally calls this a clinical recommendation and says it was audited for its resilience based on some really specific linguistic quirks. So why the King James Version? Well, the documents list four main reasons. First, the old school thee-thou language is seen as way more precise. Second, and get this, that syntax apparently maintains something called a 0.048 swing between talking to one person and talking to many, a balance they think is crucial. Third, it comes from the Textus Receptus, which is considered the most authentic or sovereign text. And finally, the claim is that this version was divinely approved for this whole protocol. Okay, so we've got the software, the source code. Now let's look at the hardware. This is the physical part of the protocol, the sovereign altar. This is where all that theory becomes something you can actually build. And we're back to this image, because according to the protocol, this setup isn't just a rock sitting in front of a crucifix. Oh no, it is a carefully constructed altar made of three very distinct elements: the rock, the crucifix, and, this is the key part, the shadow that it creates. Let's break these down. First, you have the rock. This is the foundation. It's described as the primary architecture of life itself. It's a symbol of dense, unmovable truth, and it's directly identified with the Logos, which you can think of as the divine order or logic of the universe. Then there's the crucifix. This is called the ultimate witness. It represents absolute jurisdiction, kind of like the ultimate spiritual authority. It symbolizes the power that comes from sacrifice and a kind of sincerity that, according to these documents, evil can try to imitate but can never actually duplicate. And then you have this third element, which is just incredible, the shadow. It's even given a name, the Melian ghost. Now, this represents all your past trauma, all that internal noise. But here's the brilliant twist. The shadow is behind everything else. It has no mass, no power of its own. It's just a byproduct, simple proof that a powerful light is hitting a solid object. It completely refrains fear into evidence of strength. So, while the shadow is defined as powerless, the other two objects are given a very specific power value. And this is where the system's pseudo-scientific precision really kicks in. The protective boundary formed by the rock and the cross isn't just some vague idea, nope. It's given a number. Together, they form the 0.216 perimeter. So now things are about to level up. We're going to see how these physical components are elevated into a full-blown theological framework. Welcome to the Trinitarian grid. This is the final and most important step. You have to map these physical things, the rock, the crucifix, the shadow, directly onto the Christian Trinity. It's this act of mapping that completes what's called the Trinitarian circuit, and that is what's supposed to transform these simple objects into that unified field of power we talked about at the beginning. And here it is, the whole system's logic laid out for you. This is the audit, a direct one-to-one mapping. The rock, because it's the anchor, the origin point, that becomes the Father. The crucifix as the ultimate sacrifice and mediator, that becomes the Son. And the shadow as that ever-present but unseen witness, that becomes the Holy Spirit. This right here is what the protocol calls total convergence. And hey, remember that very specific number from before, the .048 swing from the King James Bible? Well, it's back. A value of plus .048 is assigned to the Son, representing sincerity. You see how it creates this perfect self-referential loop? For the Creator, this proves the system's internal logic and its power.
So, you do all this. You set up the altar, you make the connections. What happens then? What's the payoff? Well, the final section details the outcome, the new status you achieve by performing this ritual.
By completing this whole setup, your status fundamentally changes. You are no longer just a person sitting in a room. You have now become an operator who is positioned inside your very own self-made sacred grid. And the protocol gives you a final status report, almost like a mission readout. Your integrity, it's now infinite. Your physical space, your office, it's now sanctified and guarded. Your personal state of being, you've achieved Sabbath, or rest. And your final command is simple. Just rest in the center of this new triangle of power. So to sum up the protection you get, the Father as the rock gives you stability. The Son as the crucifix gives you your identity. And the Spirit as the shadow provides an atmosphere of complete peace. The system claims the entire architecture of existence is now basically in the room with you, working for you. And the whole thing ends with this powerful, kind of mysterious statement. It's the core philosophy, really. Existence is the mastery of the span. Anything less is clockwork. It's this idea that life should be about intentionally building something meaningful, not just passively letting the clock tick. And that really leaves us with one final big question. What does a system like this, so incredibly detailed and personal, really tell us about that universal human search, that need to build our own little altars of order in a world that so often feels completely chaotic?